Is the world overpopulated? Well, today that's what we're going to take a look at the Lust is Boring podcast. I want to welcome you back to the show. We've been off for a couple of weeks now, but now with summer kicking in, we're going to go full swing ahead with episodes every week or every 2 weeks. But it's a blessing to be back with you today. Now, before we dive in with our guests today, again, want to send out a big thank you to our sponsors, Hallow and Covenant Eyes. I would hope all that you that listen to Lust is Boring podcast are already familiar with both of these, but please, for one, go to hallow.com/lustisboring. Try out their prayer app for a month for free. One of the beauties of this prayer app is it's not just static content that's sitting there. These guys are literally pouring out brand new content every single week, different meditations, lives of the saints, music. They've got sacred music, praise and worship, contemporary, you name it. There's so much on this app to deepen your spiritual life. So check out the Hallow app. Also, Covenant Eyes. I just had lunch with a father and we were talking and he's like, yeah, my kid's only 7 years old, but I'm not even sure where do I begin with protecting my family when it comes to online safety and iPads and phones when he gets old enough. And I said, you ever hear Covenant Eyes? And he hadn't. And so if you've got kids or you've got a screen and you want to be accountable to make sure not to be looking at any junk online, got to get Covenant Eyes. CovenantEyes.com. This is an artificial intelligence screen-based accountability software program. Basically what it is, it's a way to keep your kids and yourself safe on the phones. Not only will it block pornographic content, whether it comes through an app, a text message, internet browser, it'll also send your accountability partner a report every single day of what websites that you're looking at. And so you can hold the entire family accountable. And so Covenant Eyes, you can try that for free for a month for just clicking the link in the show notes or going to Covenant Eyes, and then you can use chastity as a promo code. All of that is available through Covenant Eyes. But today, we've got a great show lined up for you. This topic of overpopulation. Is the world's population outstripping our natural resources? Do we need to implement family planning protocols in developing nations to make sure they don't have too many kids so we get too crowded and run out of food? Is this really going on? What's behind this agenda? You might have heard this on your college campuses or from maybe coworkers. It was big in the 70s and 80s, but it's still around. Some of these myths die hard. And so today, who we've got on the program is a longtime friend of the Chastity Project Ministry, a gentleman that's joining us over the pond from Scotland, of all places, Emmet Dooley. Longtime friend of the ministry. This guy studied at St. Patrick's Pontifical University in Maynooth, Ireland, managed Pure in Heart, which is a great chastity pro-life organization internationally. And he actually managed that and founded up branches in America, in Haiti, in England, in Kenya. And so he's had a lot of experience, not only in developed nations, but in developing ones as well. He was actually the first and only full-time parish youth minister in all of Scotland. That's right, the first one ever, and is now in charge of, believe it or not, the oldest pro-life organization ministry in the world, which is SPUC Scotland. He's also spoken to hundreds of thousands of young people on the topic of chastity and pro-life. And so I want to welcome to the show today, Emmet Dooley. So Emmet, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, great to be here, Jason. It's a really joy. I say Irish guy living in Scotland. I often feel like I'm the Irish guy out of Braveheart.
It's my island.
Yes, more's a pity I'm not on my island.
Yeah, I'm actually half Irish, so it's good to have a different accent on the show beside Matt Fradd's Australian accent. So it's good to break things up and get an Irish guy on here. So topic of overpopulation, what got you interested in this? Because you spoke recently at our Catholic Love Life conference. You delivered a lot of awesome content. And I'm like, man, I got to get this guy in the podcast. What got you interested in this whole topic of overpopulation?
Yeah, well, I kind of feel, God works in a funny way. I often feel at times you might feel a saint tugging at you, but then I do a lot of traveling. I go to a lot of conferences. I must say I'm very blessed in that way. But all of a sudden you hear a piece from somebody, and then you hear another piece, and next thing is like the Holy Spirit just joins it together, and it's like you're just retelling a story that you've heard, but you're putting it proposing it in an attractive way that catches people's imagination and also shows there is a big problem here and nobody's talking about it. And I give so many different talks, but Jason, you should see the reaction in schools when I give this talk. Like at the start, I say, hands up here who believes the world is in any way overpopulated. And I'm not messing, 90% at least of the hands would go up. But by the end of the talk, 40 minutes later, I ask the same question, hands up if you feel the world is in any way overpopulated. And you might only have one person put their hand up. Like it's a huge swing. So and then even that person, I say, oh, why do you still feel that? And that's that's very interesting. And they would usually say something like, well, maybe it's not overpopulated. Maybe they just need to distribute the resources in a better way. So I've never had a talk do that type of swing, and it's a great kind of introduction when I might be seeing these young people maybe 4 times in their school life. And this is maybe a good way to start to say, well, this guy knows what he's talking about, or he's got his finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
So then you can bring him down the chastity road.
Oh, that's great. No, I mean, winning him over kind of intellectually to be able to say, hey, maybe the church is onto something here. Maybe she knows what she's talking about. So maybe we'll start there. Is the world overpopulated? Obviously, this has been around for a long time. Is it? Are we running out of space? We run out of food? What's going on?
Yeah, no, what really answers that question is right at the end. I just show the map of Texas. And like there's a simple math equation. You just divide all the people, 7 billion people, into a family of 4. So you get 1.75 billion families of 4. And then you can actually fit them all into Texas with, I think it's just over 20,000 square feet. Just double check that there. But see, the average size of a house over here in the UK is 915 square feet. So everybody in the whole world can fit inside a landmass the size of Texas and have a house and a yard. It's so then you look at the rest of the whole world. Well, surely we can fit in there. And just when that really grabs the young people's imagination, like, so we can all fit in there, in Texas. And then you show the map of the world and they're absolutely blown away by it. But that's just a simple math equation. But then you show them the other stuff. Like especially, they're very interested in Africa. There's a Kate Krause, he did an amazing study. Like Africa, if you look on the atlas, it's actually a lot bigger than what the atlas portrays. So this guy, Kate Krause, he was able to fit all these different countries into Africa: China, India, America, Eastern, Western Europe, Japan. They all fit into Africa. And the population of all those countries add up to 3.6 billion people. So then I just turn around and say to the students, okay, so how many billion people are living in Africa right now? And they always say like 5 billion or something, some crazy answers, but it's actually just over 1 billion. So it just doesn't make sense, because I grew up, I often see these terrible images of people starving, walking skeletons in Africa. And I say to my mother, why have they not got food? Why are they starving? And my poor mother, she could repeat back to me was what the media had told her was, they're just having too many babies or something like that. And when you kind of just look at the basic math of it, it just doesn't make sense. And then you look at, there's an amazing woman, you should definitely get her on your podcast, Uju Ikocha. She's the president of the Culture of Life Africa. And she showed me this amazing footage of all this development money being spent in Africa is on overpopulation policies and not on education. In the early 90s, it was on education. If you really want to help people, of course you spend most money on education, clean water. But now education is second from bottom, and overpopulation policies are right up there, right at the top. And you're like, what's going on here? This isn't right. It's actually there's something very underhanded going on here. And she calls it ideologically colonizing Africa. Mm-hmm. The empire, the British Empire have left Africa. The Belgians have left Africa, but their ideologies are still pushing their agendas in these countries. Telling them how to live their lives. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I remember hearing once in terms of the Texas analogy that if you put the whole world in Texas, people would have slightly more living space than they have in San Francisco, and it's slightly less than they currently live in the Bronx, and the rest of the entire world would be uninhabited. I've even heard that you can actually fit everybody in the world in Jacksonville, Florida. You wouldn't have 1,000 square feet to live in, but you could get us all in Jacksonville, Florida, and the rest of the world would be completely empty. And so, when people see that and they say, okay, we've got the space, we've got the geography, is the next question then, well, what about the resources? Like, do we have enough lead? Aren't we going to run out of petroleum? Isn't ever going to finally just eat all the bananas? There's nothing going to be left for the rest of us. Like, do we have enough resources? I would imagine would be the next question you get asked.
Yeah, and that was it. That was where this all started. Of course, I wasn't surprised when I looked into this, where this whole overpopulation come from, and it came from a vicar over in England, Thomas Malthus, in 1798, who he just looked at, well, the amount of food that was being produced and the amount of people who were being born. He's like, oh, we're all going to starve by 1890. And his model was taken up by Paul Ehrlich, a Stanford biologist in the 60s. And he just came up with this very convincing formula saying, well, there's a world food supply, and then there's the population growth. And look, we're not going to, the population growth is going to be way higher than the food supply. And he convinced so many people. His books, The Population Bomb, sold millions of copies. And he convinced so many people. And China started the one-child policy. India started sterilizing its population. So everyone was affected by this. But behind it all, he said India could never feed itself. But that same year, a good American guy from Iowa, Norman Borlaug, he had brought this new type of grain, wheat, that would totally boost the food supply, propel it way past the growth of the population. But India actually had a stamp in 1968 celebrating they were now exporting loads of wheat. They had enough for themselves, and they're actually even making loads of money exporting it to other countries. And that was the exact same year your man released the book, Ehrlich. So, we hadn't got the internet back then. We couldn't just do Google search. But the Stanford biologist, he got all the publicity. All the media was on him. But here was good old Norman. He eventually won the Nobel Prize, and he saved 1 billion lives. He says his invention, the new strand of wheat, which was ethical and all of that, was actually saved 1 billion lives. But do you know what? Nobody knows about Norman Borlaug. I did agricultural science all the way through high school, a big farming culture in Ireland, but I never even heard of this guy. He should have been on the front cover of every single ag science book that we were studying. But it was just the best kept secret. He led that green revolution, but good news travels slowly, as you know.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And so I would imagine if someone hears that, they're like, okay, so I guess we can produce enough food. Food can be reproduced. But what about all these natural resources that are in finite supply? Because if, we live to be, I don't know, lifespan of 70 years old, maybe a century or two ago, and then it became 80, then 90, I mean, isn't the population just going to continue to expand and explode? Because I imagine that's what his charts were based on. Look at these increased life expectancies. If this just keeps going on, we're just going to, be falling off the planet at some point. Where did his math not add up?
Yeah, and see, I suppose there's always going to be certain problems that are raised and giving lots of publicity. Like when I was in school, when I was in high school, and even primary, we call it primary education, but when I was maybe 10 years of age, we were told the world was going to end because of the ozone layer. We have to save the ozone. And I remember I was buying roll-on spray. I wasn't, doing the spray can to save the ozone. And and next thing, I don't know what happened to the ozone. Someone says it's still up over the Arctic, but it's fine now. But you have all these things, there's problems that will occur in history. But we seem to always have the human spirit, like Norman Borlaug. In times of war, I think humanity excels, become new, more inventive to try and survive. So, as you say, there is probably a better argument to say that, that we should invest in humanity, that we will actually meet whatever challenges are out there, whatever resources are going to, say, be depleted. I'm sure we have enough brains and ingenuity to come up with answers to these questions. That less, we shouldn't just be like, say, deleting people. That's I suppose if you watch the Avengers, someone said, with Thanos, his big clique, he wanted to wipe out half of the population, but then that was a scarcity mentality. Why not have the abundance mentality and say, well, actually, why don't I just click my finger and double the resources? That was what someone said that to me. That was a really good one. That we should, like, whatever's going to happen in the future, we should not limit human freedom because of some doomsday, naysayer, or this negative view of the future, rather than have a very positive one with faith moving forward.
Yeah,
that's kind of like, kind of comes down to that. Do you want to be Norman or do you want to be Paul Ehrlich?
Yeah, and it's not about being pie in the sky, overly optimistic. It's just realistic. I'd heard once that we in the world use less than half of the land that could be used for agriculture. We're not even using it for anything. And that's less than half, let alone farming the sea and exploring opportunities that are waiting there. But it's not as if the population is going to continue to boom because we saw an increased life expectancy.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I understand, that was mostly caused because our medicine was improving. So the infant mortality rate wasn't as high as it used to be. And people had a couple extra years at the end of their life. It doesn't mean that we're going to forever exponentially having more and more people that, we're almost at 8 billion now. It's not like we're going to become at 6 billion 10 years from now and so on. It's going to kind of, I would imagine demographers and sociologists are saying that is it rounding out? Or are we reaching the top of it? What are they saying there in terms of projections?
Yeah, I suppose it is. It's kind of what we're seeing as well in Europe, especially. There's a very aging population. So the death rate in Scotland, say for example, is a lot higher than the birth rate. And that's right across Europe. And in so many European countries, they're introducing these pro-life, pro-family policies. The guy in Hungary, the leader of Hungary, he's introduced this policy that if you have 4 or more children, you will have to pay 0 income tax for the rest of your life. Wow. So say right in here in the UK, we got maybe 25% income tax, or what, it's up around there. But could you imagine that money coming back into the family of 4? In Italy, if you have 3 kids, they will give you free farmland because, again, there's loads of farmland, no one to farm it in Italy. So they're giving that land away. In Romania, it's kind of different. You just get taxed more if you don't have kids. And there's some really weird policies in Scandinavian countries. Like in Denmark, they have this policy that if you can prove you conceived on your holiday, you can claim back the expenses of the holiday.
Wow.
It's like I was just like when I saw that I was laughing, and it was actually advertised. It was this Danish advertisement, some holiday maker, but it's a bit risque. You couldn't even show it in a school, but it's just so funny. But there is this huge there's we just see it. Russia as well. Russia, your man Putin is giving loads of money towards having a family. And this is an interesting one. Scotland over here, they're always kind of fighting for independence against England, and it's just natural. It's just one of these things that comes and goes in waves. But the treasurer here in Scotland came out and said, he's a government minister guy, and he said, look, to be truly independent, we need to have at least 500,000 immigrants to come in and boost the economy. And that number was very significant to me because I know, and my friends and who I work with, we know there has been exactly 500,000 abortions in Scotland since it became legal in 1967. So this guy is, after doing his big study, cost a few million probably to do it, and he's come out with that number that we're missing 500,000 people. Well, I think I know where they went. Wow. They were aborted. God is in the detail. We all have a destiny, definitely, and and God doesn't. We know God doesn't make rubbish or make mistakes. Everybody has a purpose, but you just look around. There's so many people that are missing, And I can also, if you look at, say people that are promoting these population fears and that overpopulation fears, look at who's being targeted the most. Well, first off is girls. Girls are being targeted the most. The UN says there is over 200 million girls missing in the world. 200 million. Like when you think, like, say, the whole COVID has brought the whole world to a standstill, and there's been 2 million deaths or just over that. But like, and that's tragic. Any death is any number is terrible. But 200 million girls are missing in the world. So what's going on there? And again, that's the targeted, the infanticide, or sorry, the what's that? Not infanticide, yeah,
Genocide?
infanticide, but was it genocide, gendercide? The gendercide of girls in China and India has led, there is 72 million more men than women in China. There is 72 million more men than women in India. Now, if you look at the birth rates, there should be a 0.01 difference in boys and girls. It's 50-50. It's basic math. But like all this thing, like whether it's infanticide, girls being killed at birth, targeted during abortion. Just to put that number in perspective, all of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, that adds up to 71 million people. So over in America, I looked at all the states and I said, so if you add up, California has 39.1 million people, Texas 27.4, and Minnesota is in there around 5.6 million. So could you imagine all of California, all of Texas, and all of Minnesota just men? Like, what a mess. Like it's crazy when you think of it like that. And like that, say the girls are being targeted the most. And like you think, with the one-child policy that was implemented in China, those people wanted to, maintain their family names. So they just wanted to keep the boys. And the girls were cast aside or aborted or whatever. And now those guys can't even find a date, let alone a wife. So the family name will probably die with him. And China has now shows how terrible that one-child policy is. Their whole demographic is on top of its head. They're now introduced a 3-child policy last week, I think. So like you don't tell people how many children they have, and it's all habit. Like I guarantee you, there's no Chinese families running out to have 2 more babies because they don't trust the government. Like it's just there's a lot. That's what, when you start playing God, when government overreaches like that, I think it just makes a big mess, and it'll take a long time for them to recover from that.
Oh, it's amazing how now we're shifting from this overpopulation discussion to an underpopulation pandemic, especially in the more developed nations. You're seeing it. I've been to Italy once. We went there with our stroller and brought a baby with us when we had one baby at the time. And the amount of attention that we got over that one kid, when people would see a baby in public, they're like, "Oh, tabima, tabima," and they're squeezing it. I'm like, "What? You never like seen a kid before in your life?" But it's like they hadn't, because like nobody's having kids over there. And it was funny that you mentioned Vladimir Putin, because I remember hearing years ago, he actually, in order to boost, I'm not making this up, in order to boost Russia's fertility, he flew Boys to Men, okay, that R&B band from the 1990s or whatever, to do concerts right before Valentine's Day in Russia to encourage people to have children. They announced a national conception day of basically saying, look, get off work, go home, procreate. And they planned this 9 months before Russia Day, which is like kind of their 4th of July or whatever. So it's basically like telling everyone in America, no work on whatever it is, like November 4th. And if you have a kid on July 4th, they gave away, I'm going to read what they said. I'm actually quoting from a study done on this. Some reporting. Putin had previously tried to boost baby making in Russia with actual cash payments by declaring the National Day of Conception, by giving away refrigerators and cars to new moms for assisting Mother Russia. And so, I mean, cash prizes, televisions, I guess they gave away. Essentially, like this nationwide effort of like, we are going to implode because the health, the wealth of the country is its people. Yes. And when you start seeing the people as the threat to national security, everything's going to get upside down real fast. And so besides targeting the women and the female unborn babies.
Yeah.
I would imagine you've seen the poor in particular
Yes.
targeted, as if the solution somehow to poverty is to reduce the number of poor innocent children, when in reality the solution to poverty is to reduce the number of corrupt rich politicians. But what have
Yes.
you seen in your travels to Kenya, to
Yeah.
Haiti, in terms of how the poor are targeted with these overpopulation efforts?
Yeah, like in Africa especially, the ODA is it's what is it called again? It's was it official development assistance? It's just you can look it up, ODA charts online there, but it's Africa is the only place where most money, this foreign aid, strings attached, is on overpopulation policies. That's the only place in South America. Anywhere else in the world, you might have education, you might have clean water first, and then population is down a bit. But all the money is being pumped into this in Africa. Interesting. Like, I've been to Kenya twice, and it was very providential each time I arrived. Back in 2008, I arrived in Kenya doing, say, pure heart work in schools, training up a Kenya mission team, because they need to just. It's no use an Irish guy. I was there with an American girl as well. No use us. We're not going to be here. So they had to take all the information we were giving them, incorporate into their culture, and then win the hearts of their people. But like, one of the things that was going on back then was there was a government policy was giving all this contraception to schools. Like, you'll get money. Your school will get money if you give out all these free condoms and all these UADs and pills and whatever, all the things, all the different contraceptives. And the De La Salle brothers there in Nairobi, they said, okay, well, we're not going to take this money and we're not going to take the contraception, but what are we going to offer instead? And they actually had a big meeting, and they decided they had nothing to offer. The very next week we landed, and your man, the principal, he was Brother Finbar, he just emptied all of his teachers and sent to our training. We were meant to be training, I think it was like 20 people. There was 98 who turned up for the first training session. So we, like, that night I was like photocopying. We had to bribe this guy in a supermarket to let us use the photocopier, and we were like this, photocopying all night. But like, and they loved it because they knew the truth, and this was like the culture of life was already in their hearts from their ancestors. But like, the big thing is, like, they're being targeted. We were like in many different ways, but like, Africa is being targeted because of resources. Okay, there was this big China camp. We were out in the brush, and there was this big Chinese compound. I said, what are they doing here? China, what's going on there? Just like, all of a sudden China was planted in the middle of Africa. And he says, oh, they're looking for diamonds or gold. I said, if they find, that'd be fantastic. You get more jobs, and you get a bit of, your economy get, booming. He goes, no, we don't want them to find anything, because if they do, then there'll be war, and to be like, just America will support one group, China will support another group, and it'll just be all a big mess. But now what's being targeted is not the African resources like coal or oil or diamonds, but what's being targeted now is the children. All across Africa, you have these big, massive billboards with an African man and an African woman smiling with just 2 kids. And this is because, like, you don't have a lot of those, like, say, you might have their phones, whatever, but these big, massive billboards, just like, you can see them from miles away because everyone's walking, and that's it. So you see a happy man, happy woman with just 2 kids, and that's what they want to promote. It's just like, and the high mortality rate of children over there, like, they have big families, and there's no retirement villages. There isn't like, the Nairobi retirement home for the elderly. So they will need their family to help them when they get older, and to look after them. Their culture is very different. But like, for all these outside influences saying they have to have only 2 kids, or one child policy, all this stuff, trying to push this on the Africans, it is terrible. And just there before COVID hit in December 2019, I was asked to go and do training with these teachers in Malindi and Nairobi. And I'm like, why am I being asked? I felt like asking God, like, why am I being asked to go back to Kenya again? And then all of a sudden, boom, just the week before I was there was a big Nairobi summit. All the, see these guys from all over the world, the globalists, were in Nairobi pushing the depopulation, increased contraception, reproductive rights. But the reproductive rights are always geared towards decreasing population. It's not about your right to actually have as many children as you want, and pushing all the bad things that don't lead to happiness, that don't lead to disease reduction. It actually leads to higher mortality, and they're just going in to bribe those politicians and trying to get into schools. And I was like, oh, okay, so God gave me at least maybe 40 or 50 teachers that they're already now for the past year and a half been given the good stuff to their students before the government can change policies. So it's something. But like, I just think those teachers were so delighted that they could have this to give to their students, because they just said, look, we are being lied to. We need to wake up. And it's great when you get that kind of synergy with the people, and they just there's a great love there. They just love that you've made the effort to come. And also, I'll be honest, I gave them a good wage for their few days work. The labor deserves their wage.
No, I'm one of my most troubling memories of traveling abroad. I was in the Philippines. I've been there, I think, 4 or 5 times to speak. And I remember just before departing once, we were going towards the airport, and we decided to swing by the cathedral there in Manila, and just to say some prayers, Thanksgiving, before we go home, safe travels. And we pull up, and outside the bishop's residence, there's literally hundreds of poor people lying in the street protesting. And so we kind of pull the car around them and get into the parking lot, and I'm, ask the host, like, what's going on here? And I look, and the poor are holding these signs like, we want abortion, we want birth control. Yeah. And the media was there. And I said, what? I'm like, the poor are protesting, asking for birth control. The poor are asking for abortion. The poor want this. And the host said, no. They said, here's what's actually going on. They said, you see that person, that person, that person. Those are with the family planning advocacy groups, the population control people, and what they do. So like, I don't remember what their name was. Like in England, it might be Marie Stopes. Out here, Planned Parenthood. Out there, whatever it was. And they said they go through the squatters, which is like the shanty towns, the real poor, and gather together all these poor people and say, look, come with us, carry our signs, and go on this little march. And when you're done, we're going to feed all of you. There's going to be lunch available for everybody. Now, a lot of these poor aren't even literate. They don't even know what the signs say, but they know if they go on this little march and they hold the signs, then they're going to get fed. And so they shepherd all these people in front of the bishop's residence. They call the mainstream media. The media films this fake little protest going on. They march down the street, and then they go get their sandwiches. And it's like, this is absolute abuse of the poor, because the cause of poverty isn't the poor kids. The cause of poverty isn't we just don't have enough food to go around. The cause of poverty typically is the unjust distribution of resources, ethnic cleansing, war, corrupt politicians. The issue is not we don't have enough food to go around. The issue is corruption. The issue is ethnic cleansing. The issue is war. That's what's causing the hunger and the poverty. And so this false narrative that no, we got to go after the kids, because once we reduce the population of poor kids, poverty is just going to disappear. As if that's going to supply education for anybody, as if that's really building a public policy that's going to grow your economy a century from now when the parents are getting old. Because the poor people know their riches are not going to be found in this world. Their riches are their children. Like, that is the wealth of the poor, is their families. And when you strip that away from them, I mean, you're in a sense sentencing them to a very lonely death, alone without kids to take care of them and a family to pass down. And so, in the meantime, you're hamstringing your national economy in the meantime.
And like, Jason, the worst thing I saw in Kenya, just like what you were saying, they had this policy that Mary Stopes, and then what they were doing was they were offering a free bus from the school to their abortion facility, right? Their illegal abortion facility. So at the abortion facility, yes, they will get fed. Yes, they will get information. They will get free contraception. But all it is it wants to show these kids, they can tell all their friends and family, this is where you come to get your abortion. It's just advertising there. And again, I'm sure that those buses, it could be those kids, their first time on a bus. And so it's just all that money, that foreign aid money, is paying for those buses. and those kids now like are just getting indoctrinated. So you come here and we can solve your problems. And it's like, it's like this magic wand. Abortion is this magic wand that can just take away all your problems. It's terrible that they get away with this. They really do pull some terrible strokes, say in terrible countries, and in Haiti as well. Like all those, I don't know if you saw them when you were there, all the big ads saying, "Oh, contraception, 100% pleasure, 100% safe." And this is like they can just advertise all this rubbish. But just what you're saying, like what I see in these countries, like you say underdeveloped, poor countries, I see also a great wealth, like of the human spirit. We brought these young children on a school tour in Haiti. We had kind of like a day off from work, like a day off from our training and stuff. And we brought these kids on their school tour. Like these kids were the poorest of the poor. This charity paid for them. They couldn't even afford to go to Haitian schools. So I said, okay, where are we bringing them? And they said, oh, we're bringing them to the beach. I mean, the beach is like, 5 miles over there. That's a rubbish holiday. That's a okay. So I went down and bought some like anything, American footballs, anything I could find. I could just bought. I bought these crayons. I like crayons. Okay, let's buy them because there's nothing there, over in Haiti. So the kids came. We brought them to the beach and they went bananas. I was like, why are they so excited? None of them had ever been outside their village before, and they had never seen the beach before, and they lived 5 miles away from it.
Wow.
So we were playing. The highlight for those kids, they said, was when I brought the crayons. They were getting a bit tired because they were hungry after playing at the start of the day. So we brought the crayons and we're going to get some food, but they never saw crayons before. And I often thought, like, I used to hate crayons. I used to love the like nice felt tip markers, but those kids, we got them this really big dish of rice and beef and whatever. And I could hear their stomachs growling. My stomach was growling. I had my dish already hoovered. And next thing I looked, and the kids weren't even eating theirs. And I said, what's going on? Why aren't they eating the food? They're waiting to share their meal with their family when they get home. And sure enough, they waited for those hour or 2 hours on the trip back because there was a big roadblock. And they didn't even touch the food. And then there was their families, and they shared the meal with their family. Because I was wondering, I was like, that's a fairly big dish. Like, I wasn't able to finish it. And, I got a big appetite. But that's what the girl who I was with, she knew they were going to be feeding the family with this stuff as well. So, like, I often think like that. Like, I was stuffing my face on my school trips, KFC, McDonald's, whatever. I wasn't thinking of anyone else. But, like, when I see things like that, like, it's just those type of things. Like, you often say, who's poor in this world? Those kids and their families have got so much more than a lot of us, But again, if you can just put in the good resources, the good networks, not these say overpopulation policies, people just trying to, get rid of the what are they called? Get rid of the I don't know. The undesirables, maybe. I don't know what they like to call them, but it is sad, but it is very good when you go over and God just takes over, and He really does bless the work when you go into these places, especially when you have the pure intention and not and you're just and being humble and not trying to tell people how to live their lives, but just propose the right way,
Yeah, and I've heard over in Africa. They've even, not only in terms of, giving the kids birth control and abortion, but even experimenting with anti-fertility vaccines on them, where apparently what the researchers are doing are pairing together in an injection HCG with diphtheria and tetanus, which is obviously serious diseases, but they don't put enough of that in the injection to infect you with it, but just enough to train your immune system as a woman to associate HCG with these, dangerous, chemicals or whatever. And then when they inject that into a woman, well, one of the first things that a newly conceived embryo emits is human chorionic gonadotrophin, HCG, but it's trained her immune system through this anti-fertility vaccine for her immune system to attack her own baby as if it's a foreign object or foreign agent. And it's training your immune system to attack your own children so that you're sterile by means of this injection. And they're they're experimenting with this stuff on women in developing nations like they're guinea pigs. pigs, knowing that they can't hire some high-powered attorney to sue them for the damages and the lies.
Yeah.
They just give them
Yeah.
the shots and tell them they're getting vitamins, and this is going to help them to not have too many more kids that they can take care of. Oh, great. Well, give me the shot. But it's deeply corrupt stuff that's happening. These
Yeah, yeah. And do you know what is encouraging? You should definitely get Uju Ikocha on your show, because there's this one guy. He was kind of a big businessman in one of the Central African countries, and he said he wanted to sue the contraception company for the misleading advertisement of 100% effective, because he was caught out, by using the product, and he actually won the case. And I think it was a Planned Parenthood, or was it Mary Stopes? It's one of the big guys, and they paid him off. They paid it off, but also they just did it because they didn't want to cause any more publicity, because that could start a whole movement of people suing the contraception companies in Africa. So it's just, I say, it's just trying to get the good stuff out there. But that experimentation you just talk about, that is like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation were kicked out of India for something similar, but it was more what their vaccines were causing disabilities and that. But we see that as well in so many of the countries. It's just been used as guinea pigs. They see these, the American or the European doctors with their white coats, and they think they're getting good medicine, but it's not, and. It's funny, on one of my presentations, there's always a clip I mention. I show Bill Gates. He always seems to. It's funny, like in my work, say with regards to abortion and the culture of life topics. There's certain things you talk about. I'm sure you're the same with your wife. We just talk about things. They just they go together like peas and carrots. Quote Forrest Gump there. But I always find Bill Gates, he always says one thing. He says it very, very regularly. He says, we need to get the population down if we do a good job with vaccines. And he always links vaccines with depopulation. And any of the teachers that they see the presentation, they always say to me afterwards, why is he linking vaccines with depopulation? Because don't vaccines make you live longer? So how does that decrease the population? So it's funny, you just get this ball rolling in people's heads. And it's funny how the kind of people look at things with a new light, because that's a one big question that's going on at the moment is with the whole vaccine thing, and how is that linked to depopulation? There's what's underhanded in there. But as you say, once you get the right doses of certain elements, we know what the body does, and like that, it's absolutely tragic when you think that the body. It's meant to be sacred. Is so natural to have a baby, but to be manipulating the body so it actually make you infertile, it's terrible. It is. It's a devious, most devious thing you can do, I think.
Yeah. Now, when you present this to the young people, like in the classroom, do you ever get a hand go up and say, well, what about areas where you have poor people that want to not have a bunch of kids, where they want to, have smaller families? Isn't contraception necessary for those families? Maybe there is a place where there legitimately maybe is an overpopulation problem. Isn't contraception needed? What would you give as a response to someone who thinks you have to be using contraception, sterilization, things like that in order to control or just plan family size in general?
Yeah, and that's where it comes in handy. My wife and I, we practice the Crichton method of the natural family planning, and how we've spaced each of our kids out. There's 2 years in between each of them, and you can do that. Because the young people their mind is blown when you show them the chart where you're not fertile all the time. They're like, what? You're not fertile. There's always certain few days within the monthly cycle you're fertile, and they just answer, God didn't make a mistake. That's in there. So we can use this, and pretty much the term often I use to help them click with it, I say green sex. And you can space the pregnancies, but I always ask them, how many kids do you want to have? And they all say, nearly all of them, they all say 2. And where's this coming from? I ask you, why is that number in your head? Oh yeah, I just want to have a boy and a girl. But why? Where did you get that from? I don't know what it's like over in your part of the world, but like here we have like Meghan and Prince Harry. He's no longer, sorry, he's not Prince Harry anymore. He's just Harry. He left the royal family, but they came out a few years ago saying they're going to have two kids to save the world. And I felt like, well, that's a lot of pressure to put on your two kids. You think you need a
You need a third to do that? Yeah.
yeah. I think you need a bit of an army to save the world. But this is being filtered down. I don't know what it's like in your part of America, but like, is there celebs come out saying stuff like that? But we have it a lot over here, and it's just kind of only have two children. It's responsible, the carbon footprint.
Yeah.
But then you look at large families and the joy that's there. Like it's just and I can say with the young people, like that there is ways you can space out naturally, and that actually helps you in your relationship. It's not like, oh, you fix yourself out with a pill or you put on the condom. It's both your fertility, it's together. You make these decisions. There's a respect there and a love there, and it helps. This helps with your whole relationship and marriage. But I suppose it's just like that new information for them that often kind of wins them over. Even they might ask that initial question about we have to have some family planning and all of this. But I think the big question I like to show them as well is there is, like, say, population density in some high population density in some regions. Like, certain African countries, you have nobody living, like the average, well, we have it here, the average person, there's 30 people per square kilometer in Africa, right? But in Europe, there's nearly 72 people per square kilometer in Europe. And as I mentioned, there's so many European countries, they're trying to do everything and anything to try and boost the population. But in those African countries, you might have a lot of people that's living in around a harbor city, that, like, and again, that comes down to corruption, but also comes down to bad planning. Like, instead of dumping money in overpopulation policies, could you not, like, just open up another port? Share it around a bit of urban development. That makes sense. You could actually do that. But again, people are interested in that. They're not. If you're not really interested in helping, or you're just trying to limit people, their freedoms, trying to limit the population, you're not really there to help. I like to use an analogy. If I meet a person who's hungry, I can give them a fish, or else then he comes dependent on me, or else I can get a fishing rod, show him how to fish, and then he's free. He can go fish. Yeah, that's it. That's what you need to do. Have that mentality rather than, okay, let's just limit the amount of people. They're having too many babies. That's why. So, like, again, there is a lot of big questions out there. But I think the initial one that captures there's always so much you can cover in a 45-minute lesson or a class. But like that, I think that grabs them, like the physical size of all those people fitting in Texas in a house and a yard bigger than what their own house is at home. That often, that kind of wins them over. But also, there's a great documentary called "It's a Girl." I do show a clip of that, and that shows the plight of girls in these, especially Asian countries, but it's throughout the world. Like, there's human trafficking, and it's the girls who are always bearing the brunt of it, and it's something. Just we have to shine the light on that. And again, one guy said to me, he goes, I'm a big feminist. He's this big massive rugby player. I said, you sure are a big feminist. So then you show him, like, actually what this is. You're actually defending, like, he sees the presentation I gave. Like, actually, I'm standing up here saying there's like 200 million girls missing in the world. That abortion is wiping out so many girls. How is that pro-woman? And like, it's just the kind of, like, you see the wheels going in their head, and it starts. You hope that keeps them moving forward. But I say we scatter the seed, and then God will do the rest.
Yeah, and just as natural family planning is a realistic way to plan a family within, urban life yourself, it's actually proven to be extremely effective in developing nations. I remember reading an article, the British Medical Journal. They said they tested NFP among poor people in India. They tested, it was 19,843 poor people, and they said they had a pregnancy rate, quote, approaching zero. And so if you want to look that up, just type in Google British Medical Journal, then type in 19,843 and NFP. And it shows that, and there's a quote in the British Medical Journal. It said, "It is therefore important that the misconception that Catholicism is synonymous with ineffective birth control is laid to rest." And so this is not to say that we should use NFP in a contraceptive way, but if there is a legitimate need sometimes to space out your next pregnancy, NFP is safer for these developing nations because you don't have to worry about, okay, what happens when this poor person starts getting breast cancer from the pill? Does she have the resources to take care of her? No, she doesn't. Also, it's more cost effective because there's not a continued cost to do it. Once you learn your body, it's like giving that fishing rod that now they've got something that they could use for the rest of their marriage. No side effects. It's more affordable. It's just as effective, but it just goes against the grain of those people in the overpopulation camp. And so they won't have it. But, again, what do they say? That, truth passes through 3 stages. First it's dismissed. First it's mocked. Secondly, it's overtly attacked. And then thirdly, it's accepted as being self-evident. And so I think, we're maybe in the second stage of this truth right now, where it's just being attacked but I think it's going to get to the point where well, maybe the church knew what she was talking about all along. And so Emmet, thank you for coming on. Where would you suggest people go if they want to learn more about overpopulation, the myths, and how to get the hard data to be able to, maybe they want to give a presentation at their university and they want to get their sources together so they can present a little speech in front of the class on underpopulation. What are some resources or websites or ministries out there where they can look?
Yeah, well, I definitely look up Ujui Kocha. She's got Strings Attached documentary. She is, the president of Culture of Life Africa, and she's in the thick of things. But also, I would definitely recommend to look onto SPUC, SPUC Scotland website, or also just you can email me as well at emmet@spucscotland.org. And I'd be glad to share whatever I've got with you guys, because look, there's loads of good information out there. It's just about putting it together, and it works, and I must say, all the young people I've seen, it just is a great starting point for them, maybe to to keep going further. Actually, well, this guy's onto something here, and what else does he have to say, and what else does our church have to say? Definitely.
Yeah, and then one other resource that I want to get out there is the Population Research Institute. Just go to pop.org. They've got lots of data there. So if you want to do a research paper, check out pop.org. Resources Emmet recommended as well. And then also, as we wrap up, I also want to invite anyone who wants to support this podcast so we can continue to create more shows and give this content out. You can support us on patreon.com/Jason Evert. Join our community. You get all kinds of free stuff. And just a big thank you to all of our patrons that are supporting this podcast. Because of you, we're able to keep this show going. So thank you for your generosity. But for any amount per month, you can help this support the Lust is Boring podcast. Just click the link in the show notes or go to patreon.com/Jason Evert. But Emmet, thank you for coming on today, and God bless you and your family, and you keep up the tremendous work you're doing.
God bless, Jason. You've been very good to me over these past years, and you keep fighting the good fight.
Well, thanks so much. You as well.